Welcome to History Before Us, the YouTube channel where we uncover, explore, and preserve the untold stories of our past. I'm your host, Frederick Deshaun Murphy, and I'm dedicated to capturing the intricacies of history, race, and culture through the voices of those who lived it. Today we're diving into the world of tourism with brother Cedric Harrison with WilmingtoNColor, located in Wilmington, North Carolina, not Delaware. This brother suffered an unfortunate setback which ultimately led him to paving a new road in life for himself via advocacy, education, and independence. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself in just one moment, but before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and share History Before Us to those who will appreciate it. All right, brother, so let's jump into it, man. Introduce these folks who are watching this to who you are.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cedric Harrison. I'm the CEO and founder of WilmingtoNColor. I'm about to give all of my titles from tour guide to slash driver to marketing, etc., etc. Yeah, but basically the day-to-day operations and management of a historical tour here in downtown Wilmington that talks about the only successful government overthrow to be carried out on United States soil, but definitely not exclusive to just that tragic story. We talk about 200 plus years of rich African-American heritage, from Green Book locations to accomplishments for Wilmington natives that were not just huge locally to the city, but impactful to the state, some impactful to the nation, some impactful to the globe.
Most definitely. And I've had the ability to, of course, take this tour. Well, was that this year or was that last year?
I think it was earlier this year.
Yeah, it was earlier this year. Yeah, it was earlier this year, and it was an absolute amazing tour. And I had been seeing it for a while. You know, you and I had actually communicated via telephone a couple of years ago about some things that weren't necessarily related to history. And then, but prior to that, there was an unfortunate setback in which you had with something that unfortunately negatively happened in the community. And I just want to spend just a brief moment into that because obviously it's funny how life works, how you go from being and having a title in this entity to now being this entrepreneur, the CEO, and now telling the world, the globe, literally, with all the different visitors that you have coming down there to Wilmington to take your tour about the rich history there in Wilmington. And so let's kind of like do an introduction phase as it relates to your background in the field of human services and how you transition out of that, even within the setback in which you had from a physical standpoint to where you're at right now.
So coming up on 9 years, 9 years now, or 9 years ago, I started a nonprofit organization. It's called Support the Port Foundation. For those that don't know, Wilmington is historically one of the biggest port cities on the East Coast, and so people call it the port, short for the port city. And so for me, I grew up in what I and many others would call a very unfortunate circumstances, and single parent household, low income, et cetera, but I was able to overcome and defeat the odds of what statistically is the outcome of that type of product of that environment. And during that time, as I was able to leave from that neighborhood, it was because I had the opportunity to go and advance my education collegiately. And went to the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, where I learned a lot about Wilmington's great, rich history, and more importantly, or not more importantly, but more sadly, about the tragedy of what happened in Wilmington during the only successful government overthrow in 1898. And it really helped me to really understand terms that I grew up hearing that I wasn't really able to really get my hand around, like structural racism, institutional racism, and those type of systems. And I started to realize that, me being in high school as a junior and witnessing my friend murder somebody in self-defense was not normal to everybody's upbringing in their childhood. And so once I really got to a place where I could learn how to recreate community, build and organize, and influence in a positive direction, is how the birth of Support the Port came. And with that nonprofit, we did violence prevention programs, mediation work, and stuff like that, from Stop the Violence campaigns where we would stop the violence signs at memorials where people have died due to violence. From there, we did put the guns down events to peace festivals to so many other things where thousands of people started to come and attend. And long story, really longer, ended up winning a grant from North Carolina Community Foundation. I ended up winning a fellowship from Z. Smith Reynolds. And during that time was able to create an activity book series about Wilmington's rich Black history called WilmingtoNColor. And so with this history work, community education, community violence prevention and mediation, to community organizing and activating, all of these wheels started to turn at the same time right around once we got hit by Hurricane Florence. And so in the midst of all of that, we also become a hurricane recovery, natural disaster recovery organization too as well during that time. And that's what really brought the light and attention to my work.
Sure.
Because we were doing such a great job with recovery on ground that the big folks like FEMA and American Red Cross was trying to figure out how we were doing it in our area with our little local resources, hands and ties and connections.
Grassroots.
Yeah, and so the background of the work that I was doing before that tragedy is now becoming unraveled, and people have found out that I've been able to go to a further height, but have still been able to keep a hand beside me, around me, behind me, however you want to put it, to continue to lift the folks around me up and stay communicated, connected on different things. And from there, I was asked to build out a new government agency department under the Cure Violence Global model, where we were able to bring in about 50 staff members or so and just kind of build a community violence prevention mediation program, which came right at the same time of another tragedy of my life, where I was a victim of gun violence. I was shot in my face, and during that time of recovery, the opportunity was presented to me to build out an agency and department that's definitely needed in not just my community, but many communities around America, as more and more people are starting to choose ways to resolve conflict by picking up a weapon and using it to hurt another.
Yeah, most definitely, and it's been great for you, right? Like not that instance, that incident that happened, of course, but just you and I having a relationship and communicating, on a consistent basis about just how the way in which we may have thought life should have been and where it is now, it's kind of like it's divine. You know what I'm saying? It has happened the way that it was supposed to happen. Of course, no one wants tragedy to be part of that story, but you haven't allowed that to impede on your ability to think bigger, brighter, more empowered, et cetera, et cetera. So salute to you for that, brother, straight up. And I tell you that, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I always like to ask everybody who's a guest on here, the love for history, where did it begin? Because oftentimes folks are like, oh, I really wasn't even interested into it like that. And, it wasn't until I perhaps got older and I got the resources, or I'm reading, I'm recognizing things were BS, for a long period of time, because now I'm a well-read person or a traveled person or what have you. So for you, think back to when you were a youngin', when did this thing called history become interesting to you?
So, and I hate to break the history lover hearts that will be watching this, but
don't do it to us, man. Don't do it to us.
but my passion wasn't necessarily the history. I've always been passionate about storytelling. So my first talent that I engaged with outside of like what the normal things was, sports, football, basketball, music. Yeah. Was theater for me. I fell in love with drama class, theater arts, and I had an audition for Juilliard and School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, and was supposed to go to school for theater, thinking I was going to be the next Denzel. And over time, looking back, I realized that I loved what acting was able to do for me. What I was able to tap into other characters and uh, and go and put myself in their shoes and their mindsets. It took me away from my reality. And during that time, it's acting. Before you know it, you're going to get period pieces, 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and to learn a character, you have to learn what's going on around during that time, and how does the environment feed into making that person into who they are. And so, just from the art of that, I believe that's where naturally, just like historically, getting the love for history kind of came from. But specifically about Wilmington's history, it wasn't really until, well, actually no, I'll say this. It was probably my senior year in high school. We have this thing called a senior class project, where you have to identify a certain subject or topic and do this full-blown project in whatever way, and then at the end of the semester you have to present it or whatever. You write papers and present it. I ended up doing my senior project on the Wilmington 10. For those that don't know, the Wilmington 10 was a protesting, organizing group that was basically they were basically political prisoners, sentenced to 282 years in prison. Only ended up really doing about a decade of it, but it took them another 40 years after that decade to actually get a pardon of innocence. By that time, many of them were already passed away, and they were led by the great Dr. Benjamin Chavis. So I did a documentary on that. I wish I could go back and find my broadcasting teacher to let me use his camera, Mr. Matney, because I had the big old, you know what I'm saying, and
you had the old school.
Yeah, and I'm riding by what I thought was the grocery store and the church where they organized and stuff like that, and that kind of first got my history, but it was just Wilmington 10, so I'm only kind of going back, 10, 20, 30 years during that time, as I'm in school, and then I go to Pembroke and I failed history the first time, right? I got this super old white man and he's dragging out every word. Yeah,
he ain't adding any soul to it. You need some soul added to it.
And so I'm like, okay, I failed. Okay. And then I get to take a new professor. And I still remember this professor's name to this day. It's Professor Anderson. I believe the first name Ryan Anderson. He's a history professor at Pembroke. He sees me clearly, he can tell I'm black. And when he finds out I'm from Wilmington, he's like, man, that Wilmington used to have such a great, rich black community, da-da-da-da. And he's like singing something that I've never seen or witnessed before. And I'm like, I'm like, are you sure you got the right Wilmington? I know it's a few other Wilmingtons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm from the one
there's
right down
Delaware. Here. There's a couple of others. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, no, there's, and so he brings me a little bit of research, and then starts showing me some videos that are being recorded, some interviews, and later on, those interviews is what was the content of Wilmington on Fire. Christopher Everett was putting out these clippets to crowdfund during that time. And
shout out to Chris too.
Absolutely, shout out to Chris. And so I see the one with Dr. Umar. I'm in college during this time. This is when Umar Johnson is really getting and rolling. And I see Dr. Umar talking about Wilmington. And I'm like, hold on, what is I missed something during my journey. And so I started trying to find what I missed. And that's when I just fell in love, like I said, with story. I've been in love with storytelling, but now I'm finding out about all these beautiful stories of so many other different people that have accomplished, those like unimaginable things. And I'm in a town where people are trying to tell us to get away and get out and don't come back and don't put back into the community. And so,
your own folks? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's that thing that's there with that, where I think that sometimes when people feel like there's only been despair for such a long period of time, that there could only be a sense of progression away from. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So perhaps there's some commonality that's there. I feel like in a lot of communities.
Absolutely, I do. And unfortunate, like it may be progression where you go. But ultimately, it just creates a bigger problem for where you left
at home. Yeah.
And from when I already knew the history, right? But I didn't understand like make a business out of these things, right? But what I did learn when I lived in Atlanta, and I mean, I'm still studying entrepreneurship still to this day. But as I started to study entrepreneurship, really that seed was planted when I was in Atlanta. But as I'm really studying it, I'm realizing, that when there's a big problem, and you find out the big solution, that's big business, right? And so I felt like, if I put in the ground and pound work, right, and really build a foundation, that I could be a trailblazer to a big business, right? Because eventually, big businesses all start off small, right? And I knew that, if I plant the tree today and I understand and have the patience, that the fruit and everything like that will not come until 20 years later, that I need to go ahead and start planting the seed for this tree now.
Yeah, and it's never too late.
Never too late. Never too late. Two best times to plant a tree: 20 years ago and right now. And so
there you go.
And so I started my tree about 3 years ago with WilmingtoNColor History Tour, and I'll stop there so we can go into more level of detail. I don't want us to keep going into a rabbit, but yeah.
No, you're good, bro. You already answering so many questions already. So about the tour, and I've taken a lot of tours, right? As you know, I mean, I've been doing history before since 2016, but that's only when I decided to platform it. I had always been doing things as it relates to history. It just wasn't on a really, a visible scale. You know what I'm saying? Because history to me is also very intimate. And because history is very intimate, sometimes I don't share things that I've learned or places that I've been, because those moments are just that impactful. And so in a world to where there's literally usually no privacy in our lives, some of those morsels I try to keep for myself. And so, but with that being said, you have created something from a tourism standpoint that I personally feel amplifies the tourism experience there in Wilmington with your tours.
Yeah.
And I've been on numerous tours, like I've mentioned, but to have an immersive experience is different, right? Just going around and pointing to say that this person lived there, that person lived there, boom, boom, like that's okay. That's easy to find. But I have found that within your tours, you humanize the people doing your tours and really make it an immersive experience. Give me the inception of this tour, how you started, and how you felt like you have progressed from the beginning up until right now.
Yeah. So coming out, starting the tour, I also knew, because if anybody knows me, like, I'm in the history or whatever, and sometimes I feel like when people think history or think people that are into history, I think they put us in like this box. I want to let people know that I hang out outside of that box. Okay, anybody that knows me knows I like the history during the day, party at night, whatever. Hang out.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I'm a good time, and so I wanted that to reflect in the business, because I didn't just want to attract like people that are already just loving history. I wanted to attract people that may not ever even been curious about history, right? Especially because I understand that systematically we've been kind of trained to not be attracted to our history, especially the stuff that looks really good, right? And also the things that have been done really bad to us have also been either soft blowed or not told in its real true entirety. And so I wanted to make sure that I told the story in its true entirety, but then I also wanted to make sure that I brought something that, even if you're not really into history, you can still stay engaged and entertained long enough to take this information in. So to first start off the tour, we first drove the bus around, but we wanted to make sure that people felt the energy, you know what I mean? Like really touch the soil. And so it would be specific stops where we would get off at when we would do the tour and let people have that moment. Eventually, over time, we put a television onto the bus. And at first I had a little voiceover where it's just like a little video playing where our logo is showing, from Big B, the radio DJ, from the local urban radio station here. And it was a cool little introductory, but I knew I wanted to take it to another level. So eventually we ended up creating an actual audio visual presentation, and so now the tour starts off. It's like this 10-minute summary of Wilmington's history from its incorporation in 1739 all the way up until now. And then once that video is done, then we get into the back and forth, and eventually we also start to add. We have a big old box of books and literature, and so now you're seeing the video, you're seeing things outside your window, you're seeing the actual content of where we got some of these stories sourced from in your hands, just in case you want to directly read from it, read other things around the stories. You know what I mean? Like if you take our history as like a Bible, we're basically pulling a few different verses out. So you want to go and read more verses from that chapter and things of that nature. Here goes those books, or these many different books that we have. And we used to, as I told you, we used to let people get on and off the bus. But in Wilmington, there's like these seasons where like you never know when it's going to start raining. You don't know if it's going to be too hot, too cold. And as we started to do more and more tours, our group started to get bigger, and as the groups get bigger, it's harder to control the crowd. Like once you get a group off of the bus, one pack goes over here, some of them are over there looking into stuff, and before you know it, it's taking an extra 20 minutes to get everybody back on the bus, and that can offset your scheduling, and that's bad for business. So so now we keep people on the bus. We do stop on the bus, let people take pictures, but they can't actually get off, except for the Deltas. Whenever we get in front again, the Deltas in with that house.
The Delta house.
I'm not arguing with the Deltas. Yes, y'all can get off, ladies, and take the pictures. And the same thing goes for the AKAs. Whenever we get in front of the AKA house, yes, yes, y'all can get off and take.
They'll be on your head if you didn't.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? I don't want no smoke. So, I just and so with that experience, we have been able to really capture like how long the timing is, and now we're doing 3-4 tours back to back in a day because we're able to stay on point efficiently with the scheduling because of we know the timing of the videos, we know how long it takes, even if the Deltas or the Ks do get out to take a picture, and by the time we get back, all of the books are returned and etc.
And it's an absolutely amazing tour, you all. Obviously, there's a great deal of learning that you have to do for yourself to be knowledgeable on these tours because you get thousands of questions. I'm sure. How do you continue to push yourself to make this tour not be mundane, and then also to expand your knowledge about the city in which you were born and bred?
I mean, so there's multiple. I got excited about this because I'm actually happy to talk about it. I really got excited because I want to highlight our intern. We have an intern, Cassandra McNeil with UNCW, and so she's actually getting her master's degree in the history department at UNCW. And we have that partnership with the university where they're paying that intern to come in and work for us and give us tours and stuff like that. And so when she's not giving tours, or also time, and just now you're talking about real history lovers. She's very passionate, very, very passionate. So whenever we're meeting up for tours, she's just bringing me more stuff, bringing more content, or we'll have a conversation, or we might be might have a question that we probably couldn't have answered on that particular tour. And you know what I'm saying? It's like,
she's the person,
it's passion. So it's just like somebody just refilling that enthusiasm. And now we're like, we got to go find that out. And so we'll go figure that out. But then there's been other times where we just have people take our tour and they knew that person or they knew the person that knew that person or been friends with their daughter or went to that old school or that church. And now they're giving us a direct story. Like there's a story that I've told for a long time, even before the tour. Like I told you, I did my senior project on the Wilmington 10.
Wilmington 10.
When the Wilmington 10 were protesting, there was a group that were protesting against them called the ROPs, which is the ROWPs, Rights of White People Society. And it was a direct extension of the KKK. And so I really didn't fully, truly believe it. Like, not believe it. Like, I know that, like, white violence is absolutely real. But I'm like, really? Like rights of white, like, rights of, really? And then I ended up having somebody she was the niece of her. She was like, her uncle was a part of Rights of White People and started to share with me some of the stories of, like, how, like, the family would be, like, ignore him during, like, sometimes he would go on, like, little rants during family gatherings. And so getting those stories, I had a charter member of the Delta Sigma Theta chapter at UNCW take my tour, and she was talking about how they were coming and protesting with the high school students during that time, and gave me a real story. And so these are like oral storytelling, research, continued research, to also still learning from the people that I was getting this from beforehand. So like still talking
real time learning.
Exactly. Still talking to historians that I got the first stories from. You know, some of them have passed away, like Miss Cynthia Brown, who really championed me into this space. But some of them are still alive, like Dr. Glenn Harris at UNCW. And so being able to get those stories from those folks, and then people like, there's other publications now that are like bigger than Wilmington that are telling these stories. Like ABC made an article, and PBS made a documentary. And so being able to continue to see the research the content that's continued to still being put out, and learning more from those stories, and diving or making connections. Like maybe I've heard a piece of it, but now this goes into a really deep connection and gives me a little bit more that I can connect to what I already knew. And so those have been really great tools for me and my team.
For sure. Yeah, thank you for that. There's nothing like learning something real time, especially from somebody that was actually there, or someone who is just so steeped in that knowledge that you feel as if you were there, right? Like I think that there's a certain synergy that happens whenever we do make that connection with people who have that lived experience, or is the voice of a person who has lived in that specific experience. So
and social media, I just thought about it too, and social media too. Like I found a lot of content through social media, maybe not necessarily stories I haven't heard before, maybe one or two, but told in a creative way. And so you're on the bus, we'll play an Instagram video, you know what I mean? And it explains to you, like there's a really cool one we have on our page that's like a rap about David Walker. We have another one that's really cool about Dr. Benjamin Chavis. And so I just wanted to share that too as well. Like there's content online too.
Most definitely. Yeah, you're very eclectic with how you present this history, for sure. So that leads kind of to this question, and I know it's difficult to pick one, right? I know this is going to be difficult for you, but what is like one of your favorite stops on the tour, whether it's a person or just an overall thematic aspect of the tour? If you could just pick out one, what would that be? Always pick this one. It's been my favorite story. It's been my favorite story for a long time. It's the David Walker story. It is tough though, picking just one story, because honestly I would say it would depend on the crowd. But David Walker is the story that no matter who the crowd is, everybody's wild. Like what? Like nobody like. I do. It is a few rare occasions where I do get people that have heard about David Walker, but they still didn't really truly know the full dynamic of his, accomplishments and how impactful they were. So yeah, I would say the David Walker story. I don't know you want me to share it or not, but yeah. Give us a snippet, because I want people to take the tour, of course. And real quick, before we even go there, tell people where they can find you. We want to do that in the middle of this and then at the end. Yep. And then we'll jump into David Walker.
Okay, yeah, they can always find us at WilmingtoNColor on social media. That's WilmingtoNColor, all one word though. And then definitely find us on our website, www.wilmingtoncolour.com. And if interested in collaborating or partner, you can always email us at info@wilmingtoncolor.com. Yep. But David Walker
and real quick. So I said Wilmington in color. I don't know why I said in color. I don't know why I've always thought it was Wilmington in color.
Yeah, I mean it's a play on the word. So when you're typing it out, it's just WilmingtoNColor, all one word. But if you're typing it, but like if you're saying it to somebody, you would say WilmingtoNColor.
Wilmington in color. Yeah. Okay.
You really say Wilmington, North Carolina in color.
In color.
The Wilmington and the N and the C. So we just play on the letters. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what's up. That's what's up.
That's what the
All
young
right, so
folks do.
David
So we're
Walker.
trying to stay hip with the young folks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so David Walker. David Walker,
man,
put us up on game.
Yeah, so David Walker was born in Wilmington in 1796. So this is literally, we're talking about 60, 70 years before slavery is even abolished. And Wilmington is a city in the South, right? We're under the Dixie line or what have you. And so the first wow in the story is that David Walker's born free here in Wilmington. And we got to go into detail about that. You know, like at first I just used to tell people, hey, David Walker's free. But then every time we was getting to the end of the tour, people were like, how was David Walker born free, right? And so we talk about how there's this legacy rule where you're awarded the status of your parent. And your parent like grants that access, because believe it or not, it was some parents that wouldn't actually grant the access for those kids, for their kids to be free. But that wasn't the case for David Walker. David Walker was able to be free, got tired of being free in Wilmington, as he had to see his peoples in shackles and chains. Ironically, the first place he moved was further down south, which is South Carolina. But not ironically, he did move to Charleston, South Carolina, and got thoroughly immersed in the African Methodist Church and the abolitionist movement and the free black population. And from there, was inspired to go to Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and became a part of the Underground Railroad. Now he's helping runaway refugee slaves find work all the way up north as far as Canada. And from there, he's now inspired to go to Boston, Massachusetts. He opens up a clothing store, like a vintage or a thrift shop, however you want to define that. And during that time, he ends up writing for the Freedom Journal, but he ends up also doing some one-offs and ends up writing something called a preamble or an appeal or a pamphlet to all of the colored citizens around the world, but more especially to those of the United States. And this book is so potent, like just so, like it could change America still right now in America's real time. Anyways, he ends up putting this and extra stitching in the clothing that he owns and sends them by the loads to enslaved individuals in the South, because, you know, people enslaved need clothing very cheaply or what have you. And so he's looking out for his people, right? Another community way. But then he's also, the books are stashed in the clothes. So now the enslaved individuals are trying to figure out what's this bulky thing in their jacket or their pants. And it's this book. And now they're going to take it to the community reader or whoever has that skill. And it's telling them that it's more of us on the plantation than the master, and it needs to be overthrown. And before you know it, a numerous amount of slave rebels start to happen throughout the South. And then almost about a year later, the biggest slave rebellion in America, led by Nat Turner, happens. They say it's directly inspired by this book. David Walker becomes a co-founder of the General Color Association, which directly inspires Marcus Garvey. They say the book also later on inspires Malcolm X. Unfortunately, David Walker ends up dying at the age of 33 as he's working on his third edition. This book, as soon as it comes out, it was banned. It was illegal, and not only was it illegal, but death was the punishment. So they were killing people for reading the book. You can guarantee they were trying to kill the man that created it. He didn't let that stop him, though. But they did put that to an end. On record, historically, it has been said that he died from tuberculosis, but other researchers and historians believe something different.
Which is wild, because when we talk about banning of books, you know, we're seeing that play out real time now in 2024 going into 2025, and obviously this is something that's been going on since the 1800s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I would think that was the 1800s in which that occurred.
Yeah, it was.
Which is just absolutely asinine, man. So thank you for singling that out. I know it was difficult to do.
Yeah,
because, you know, there's so many great things that's on the tour. So to kind of round us out here for today, you know, we can't talk about Wilmington without talking about the massacre, right? And I want to give another shout out to to Chris Everett with Speller Street Films. He has a film out that was released, I want to say 2016, that was called Wilmington. That is called Wilmington on Fire. He is currently working on Wilmington on Fire 2. I think that's almost done, and can't wait till that comes out. The very first one was so educational. I didn't know about it until I saw that back in 2016. I purchased it on Vimeo, and you're obviously a Wilmington native, and so if you don't mind sharing for those viewers who don't necessarily know what happened in Wilmington, give us a brief history about how white folks were utilizing the resources and the services of black folks during that time period in all facets of life, right? Like, this was really the black Mecca. People look at Houston and Atlanta as being the black Meccas now in the South, but the reality is during that time period, Wilmington was the black Mecca of the South. And so do you mind giving us a little bit of detail about that without giving away too much, because they got to come take the tour to learn more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do want to shout out Chris Everett again. I saw the film also in 2016. He released it exclusively at Cucalores. And by that December, I had created the coloring book activity series, my first one. And the last page is an advertisement for you to go and purchase a copy of a DVD of Wilmington on Fire. Show you how fast time goes, right?
Right.
2016 DVDs are still a thing. And so just want to give Chris that shout out, and also just shout out that we're in Wilmington on Fire too. But what happened in Wilmington? Before even slavery was even abolished, Wilmington had a rich, free black population, and eventually, once slavery becomes abolished, that kind of underground, behind the scenes things becomes mainstream. You know, black males get voting rights, and now the already highly educated blacks that just weren't maybe legally supposed to be highly educated are now showing off their high levels of education. They're taking things to a totally different new level, and Wilmington becomes like this real mecca and example of what Reconstruction can look like in the South, especially for black people, as the first black doctors, tailors, watchmakers, jewelers, our lawyers are all, roaming around Wilmington, and 11 dining establishments. There's 10 of them owned by Wilmingtonians, and there's 125 entrepreneurs just in general. And also during this time, there is a recession that kind of hurts the white farmers and poor whites in that area during that time, and so those folks are known as like the Populist Party, and blacks, of course, were with Republicans because Lincoln was the Republican, and Lincoln freed the slaves, and so right, and so during this time, they build a party together, and they call it the Fusion Party, where blacks that are just recently freed have now linked with farmers and progressive whites and poor whites, liberals or what have you. And now these people are taking over seat after seat after seat in Wilmington until about 1894. Now they have fulfilled all of the seats in Wilmington. And now they have a few amount of folks all the way on the state level representing. And people at the state they start to talk about, certain folks. There's another story that we share of a man named Abraham Galloway. He was one of the first black senators. He was from Wilmington, and he was known to break every Jim Crow rule, wishing somebody would say something to him. And so there was already a little tension built up past the Civil War, with certain personal individuals that were from Wilmington to just the whole general body of Wilmington's black community and this progressive thing that was happening. And so
everyone started catching strays.
Yep, everybody, literally. And so they, ex-Confederate soldiers or just, racist white men, literal, some certain members of KKK and other different secret societies or what have you, you're into that, start to, and members of the Chamber of Commerce start to come together to plan on how to take this city back from Wilmington. And so, just like in many other towns where you have a massacre, just a rage of violence take place, that happens here in Wilmington, but it's done with some specific weapons. So weapons that they feel like were specifically almost passed down directly almost from the president. Their first machine guns of their kind, first rapid fire guns, called the Gauntlet gun. And this mob of men led by a gentleman by the name of Waddell, they go and start rallying up other whites. They meet together at this armory, get these guns, and they go to a newspaper that a year before was in a media kind of back and forth with a daughter of the Confederacy writer that was a very famous writer by the name of Rebecca Felton, who was basically on a campaign to lynch as many Negroes as possible. She felt like you had to lynch black men in order for white women to be protected. And
in addition to that, real quick, if you all YouTube and Google, if you type her name in on YouTube, you'll see an interview where she talks about her time during the institution of enslavement. Have you seen that?
I have not seen the video of her.
Yeah. And so you'll see that as well. So just Google her, and then you'll see that footage.
Yeah, mean old lady. But But Alexander Manley responds back to that, and he says, nobody's not raping. There is cases happening. It's situational. There's nothing general. And even if you go back and look statistically, you can see that there was no high level increase percentage in rapings. They were trying to make it seem like it was this epidemic of rapings happening from blacks. And if you go back and look at the numbers, you see that was not the actual case. But he says that in the thing and talks about how white women are actually very enthusiastic with connecting with black men and things of that nature. And so they try to make this social thing be the main thing for why they now need to take over this city, right? And you don't care about the politics of what's going on. You care about who your daughter's messing with, or what your wife is doing, or what have you. And so now that threat becomes so huge that folks outside of Wilmington are now coming to Wilmington. And they're called the Red Shirts. People compare them to the Proud Boys of today, and they're setting up at different voting polls, and they're scaring away voters, specifically black voters or voters that vote for the Fusion Party. And during that election, every person of the Fusion Party that was up for election that year was not voted in. But to the angry mob, that was not good enough for them. And so after they got those guns, they actually went to the Daily Record, the newspaper that Alexander Manley owned, burned it down, and then went to massacre the rest of the town. And then even though they massacred a very, very, very good amount of individuals, they still didn't have that political power fully, because there were still members of the Fusionist Party that was not up for re-election still in place. And so this is where your coup happens. This is where your government overthrow happens, because they go to the city hall, make these remaining members of the Fusionist Party sign over their political seats. And the guys holding the guns to their heads are the ones that write their names in to be the leaders. And it's a successful coup because they write themselves in position and stay in position for years to follow. And it wasn't just a local thing. These guys go out to be United States Supreme Court judges, head of General Assembly members, head of the Congress, Senate leaders, head of the Navy. 5 of them became governors, lieutenant. There were some others that were lieutenant governors, and others were mayors. And they made rules and regulations on those bigger regional, national scales that some are still being perfected to this day. The main reason why North Carolina is the #1 state for gerrymandering is connected to this. People also say that politically Jim Crow was written on 3rd Street when they wrote the White Declaration of Independence. People don't know too, that was also created here in Wilmington. They wrote a White Declaration of Independence, and there's a black church that the angry mob broke into that still has that White Declaration of Independence kind of framed up for people that don't believe that it actually exists.
Man, just a fascinating story on so many levels. In one aspect, it's just the independence that Black folks had, of course, and the resources that they had, and the people who were actually coming to utilize them. Because you also have to, if you're not looking at things from a singular lens, recognizing that there were and there had to have been some positive relationships between some of the whites that were there in Wilmington who were actually going to Black folks to receive services, right? But then you had this other side that is just, and because a lot of it, I personally feel, I mean, you're talking about 1889, right?
1897.
I'm sorry, 1890, yeah, 1897. And so that's not too terribly far after the Civil War.
Not
right?
at all.
So these could have been family members or what have you of people who they may have had formerly enslaved, or everyone. It's a small town, so everyone would know each other. Whether it's by surname recognition or just the institution of bondage, or if a person was a freed person, right, and has always had the privilege of going out and doing their thing. Not saying that they didn't have any challenges, because it had to have been very anxiety stricken to know that you're a free person of color, and at any point in time you can be captured or what have you. But it's just such an amazing story, and there's been so many books that have come out, and so many films and things like that's come out. And you and I, we've talked about the perspective of the more eyes that are on this story, of course, the better, because it helps amplify that. Now, in the arena in which we're in right now, to where there's been so many bannings of books and stories and things like that, we'll have to see how that plays out on a mass level. But that's why I think that platforms like yours, and hopefully platforms like History Before Us, from a grassroots efforts, continues to amplify and make people well educated about these things that have happened historically. So I greatly appreciate you for being on today. That's my goal, is to keep getting individuals like yourself that have stood the test of time, research, and have said, I'm bold enough to step out and to tell these stories. And in this specific case, you started a tour, an actual full-blown tour, to make sure that people that come to the city of Wilmington have the option to have a more comprehensive understanding of history. And the tour is absolutely amazing. I've taken a tour, and in any time that I'm back in Wilmington, which will most likely be sooner than later, I have a couple of things that I've been thinking of. I'll definitely be taking it again. And so one last time, brother, if you can tell people where they can find you, all your social media things, and then some things that you have coming up. I saw where you have something going on for Christmas. For the tour as well. So if you don't mind closing us out with that, we'll be solid.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely want to thank you. Absolutely. When people come and take the tour, whether you took the tour before, there's always things that we're adding. We're getting new tour guides. We're getting more stories, like I just shared. And as we're getting more stories, we're sharing those stories, and from books and stuff too as well. So please continue to take us, and also not just history, but literally not just history in the past, but literally history that's being made to this day. We're showing you Black businesses right now around Wilmington. We're showing you other businesses that support and put their money back in the disenfranchised community. Those are another entity. But yes, we're currently doing our holiday history tours with Soul Santa. So in Wilmington right now, if you want to take an actual picture with a Santa that looks like you and I, if we weren't in business, there would be no place in Wilmington where you could do so. So we're doing that. Many different reasons why, and that's not what we're here for. I'm just here to talk to y'all about it. So yeah, we're doing holiday history tours. You can take pictures with Black Santa, but not only can you take pictures with Black Santa, but and also take the tour. But we're also using some of the time for you to be able to look at the lights. So usually we do tours during the day, but our holiday history tours happen at night so that you can see the beautiful Christmas lights downtown. We even stop in front of the big Christmas tree downtown. You can get out, take a picture there. But then we also have a little Q&A where you participate. We'll give you a little, a candy cane or a sweet holiday treat or a little prize or gift that you can pick from. And it comes at a cheaper price than our regular full-blown historical tour, as it's something that we want people to bring the whole family out to do during the holiday season. But we just started doing holiday-themed tours as tourism slows down after summertime, and really slows down once the holidays get here around Thanksgiving and so forth. And so in October, we did a really cool Halloween-themed tour where we would take people at night and take them to Pine Forest Cemetery. And now for this holiday, we're doing the holiday histories Santa tours, and this is our first year doing it. But we're already receiving so much traction that we know we're going to do it again next year. So for all my
Nice.
other entrepreneurs or folks trying to figure out how to build businesses around still telling the story and staying true to us, that might be something that you can benefit from. Last but not least, definitely want to get out this February 15th, during UNCW homecoming weekend, but also just during Black History Month. We're going to be having a Black History Carnival at the 1898 Memorial Park, where we're going to be giving many
Nice.
Black History tour rides, bouncy houses, speeches. There'll be a little adult tent where the adults can hang out while the kids going to play on the bouncy houses. We have a little game room and a little video arcade game truck that'll be there. People can play spades, cornhole, dominoes, and do the things that we like to do for our culture and history. We are currently looking for sponsors and looking for vendors that want to come out and engage. And we do have a link currently right now. You go visit us on social media, on Facebook at WilmingtoNColor, or on Instagram. We do have a link right now where you can go ahead and purchase your Pay What You Can all access band. So it's a carnival. So think of it as a bunch of different things that you can engage into and do while you're there. And all you need to do is just do a donation for a little band to be able to engage in it all. And so, that's February 15th from 12 to 5 p.m. in Wilmington for Black History Month. But you can find all of these things if you follow us on social media at WilmingtoNColor. 2 words all in one.
Hey man, you are doing so many great things in the community, and I thank you for sharing your story from a comprehensive standpoint, not just a tour, but just your own personal story as well, because it's very, very inspiring. And so I hope that everyone has learned something today. Thank you for following my page. And again, you can follow me at History Before Us on all social media platforms as well. And listen, it's December the 19th, so we're not too far from some major holidays that are coming up that's going to usher into the new year. I wish everyone a prosperous and a safe and healthy new year. And let's continue to make sure that the underrepresented history that we all know and love that's happened in the past, as well as what's happening right now, is amplified. And we should be the conduits to deliver that to the masses. And you just never know who's listening. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy how often, I may have done something, that posted something years ago, and someone inboxed me and say, hey, that was my relative, or I've been to this place, or I visited this spot because of your social media or what have you. And I'm sure you get the exact same thing. And so we all have agency in this, and we all have a responsibility, and I'm just hoping that we all recognize that and empower ourselves as well as others through it. So listen, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Make sure that you subscribe and share with a friend. Peace.
Thank you, man.